There is a silence so subtle that no one ever hears it. A silence that falls inside a woman one ordinary afternoon while she is still pouring coffee, still laughing at something he said, still leaning her elbow on the same kitchen counter she has leaned on for years. Nothing breaks, nothing announces itself, and yet, somewhere beneath her ribs, a door that had been left open for a very long time closes gently, without a sound. He does not see this door. How could he? What he senses, vaguely, is only a small disturbance in the air, the way you feel a change in pressure before a storm, the way an animal lifts its head before the rain. Perhaps you have lived this moment yourself. Perhaps you were the woman in the kitchen, or the woman on the train, or the woman who looked at her reflection in a darkened window one evening and did not recognize the eyes looking back at her. You were still there, in the room, in the marriage, in the conversation, and yet a part of you had already stepped behind a veil you could not name. This is not coldness. This is not the slow drift toward leaving. What I want to speak about today is something far quieter and far more powerful than any of those things. Carl Jung, in the long evenings of his late writings, described a process that he believed shaped every intimate bond between a man and a woman. He called it projection. And although he never gave it the dramatic name it deserves, this phenomenon is, in my view, one of the great hidden engines of relational suffering and one of the great hidden doorways of feminine becoming. Today, in the quiet space of this video, we are going to walk inside that doorway together. To grasp what unfolds, we must first speak of what Jung named the Anima. The Anima is the inner feminine that lives unseen in the depths of every man. She is shaped by his mother, by his earliest tenderness, by the lullabies he never remembered consciously, by the women who marked his imagination before he knew what imagination was. Every man, whether he knows it or not, carries this figure within him like a sleeping inhabitant. And when he meets a woman who seems to resemble her, he projects this inner image outward, the way a film projector throws a luminous figure onto a white screen. For a time, sometimes for many years, the woman in front of him is no longer entirely herself. She has become the screen. She has become the place where his anima dances. He believes he knows her. He believes he understands her thoughts before she speaks them. He believes she is, in some essential way, his. And as long as this projection holds, a strange and very specific equilibrium is established. She remains, in his psyche, accessible, readable, familiar. Imagine a woman who, for years, has been the soft surface upon which a man's inner film has played. She has listened. She has anticipated his moods. Her own desires, slowly, almost imperceptibly, have been folded smaller and smaller, until they fit in the corner of a drawer she rarely opens. Then, one morning, without any visible event, something inside her stirs. A long-forgotten part of her opens an eye in the darkness. It does not shout. It does not declare itself. It simply remembers, with a quiet certainty, that it exists. And from that moment, although her face has not changed, although her voice still pours coffee with the same warmth, the screen has begun, almost invisibly, to ripple. Here is something that took me a long time to understand, and I want to say it slowly, so that it can sink in. A woman does not become unreachable when she leaves. A woman becomes unreachable when she stops being absent from herself, even while remaining in the same room. Picture a still lake at the very edge of dawn. The surface is so smooth that the sky lies on top of it like a second sky, and a man kneeling at the shore believes, for a moment, that he is touching the heavens themselves. But beneath that mirrored surface, a slow current begins to move. The wind, somewhere far off, sends a single breath across the water. The reflection trembles. The man at the shore looks up, startled, because the sky he thought he had captured has suddenly become unrecognizable, even though the sky itself has not moved. This, almost exactly, is what happens in the psyche of a man at the moment a woman begins to return to herself. She has not gone anywhere. She has not raised her voice, and yet the surface upon which his inner image was resting is no longer flat. A depth has reappeared beneath her, and that depth will not let the old reflection settle again. There is, in this experience, something that resembles a long night in an unfamiliar landscape. Imagine walking through a forest you have known since childhood, every tree memorized, every turning of the path inscribed in your body, and yet one evening the moon hides behind a cloud, and suddenly everything is strange. The trees are the same, the path has not moved. What has changed is the quality of the light, and with it, the entire meaning of the place. A woman who has come home to herself becomes, for the man who loves her, exactly such a landscape. Familiar in form, foreign in essence, he no longer predicts her. He no longer reads her silences with the easy fluency he once possessed. She has retreated into an inner room of which he holds no key, and Jung called that inner room the self, the deep center from which authentic life flows. As long as a woman is severed from that center, she lives on the surface of her own existence. She adjusts, she accommodates. Her intuition, finely tuned over years of attentiveness to others, allows her to guess what is expected of her almost before the expectation is formed. And the man beside her, encountering only this responsive surface, believes he has met the whole of her. But when she descends, when she finally walks down the inner staircase toward that long abandoned chamber, the texture of her presence changes. She is no longer a yielding mirror. She has become a presence. A presence, you must understand, is something entirely different from a reflection. If these words are awakening something in you, if you feel, as you listen, that a quiet part of yourself is beginning to recognize what is being described, perhaps you arrived here at the right moment. You are welcome in this small space of reflection, and if the path we are walking accompanies you in some way, you can subscribe so that you do not lose the thread of this slow inner journey. Now let us go further, because there is a dimension of this transformation that often goes unspoken. Many women believe that they must perform their distance. They believe they must slam a door, write a letter, stage a departure, in order to finally become inaccessible to a man who has taken them for granted. This is one of the great misunderstandings of feminine power. The dramatic exit, paradoxically, often confirms the man in his sense of comprehension. He can name what happened. He can place the event in a category. He can file her away as the woman who finally left and then resume his life with the illusion of understanding intact. What truly unsettles him, in the most ancient layers of his psyche, is something far quieter. It is the experience of seeing you in front of him, apparently unchanged, and feeling that he no longer reaches you. That is the rupture of projection. That precise discontinuity between the woman he believes he sees and the presence he can no longer touch. Think of a woman who has spent years explaining her emotions, justifying her needs, building patient arguments to be heard. Many of us have been this woman. We believed that if we were only clear enough, only articulate enough, only generous enough in our pedagogy, comprehension would finally arrive. Now picture that same woman on an ordinary Tuesday morning, sitting at the kitchen table and noticing, without drama, that she no longer feels the need to plead her case, not from anger, not from strategy, simply because something within her has understood, in a deep and irreversible way, that her worth does not depend on whether her words are received. A woman who stops pleading her case becomes, almost overnight, illegible. The man across from her, accustomed to a certain rhythm of demand, a certain music of complaint and request, suddenly finds himself before a silence that no longer matches any silence he had previously known. This is not the wounded silence he had learned to soothe. This is not the waiting silence that reassured him. What sits across from him is a silence that asks for nothing, a silence that is inhabited, a silence so full it does not need to be filled. Before such a silence, projection cannot hold. Here is another sentence I want to place gently into your evening. The moment a man begins to experience you as a mystery is the exact moment you have stopped expecting anything from him. There is, in the masculine psyche, an old gravitational pull toward what slips out of reach. This is not a flaw. This is structure. Much of masculine becoming, across cultures and across centuries, has been organized around movement outward, around pursuit, around the act of grasping. As long as he believes he has grasped, the inner figure he projected onto you begins, very slowly, to lose its charge. But the moment he senses that what he believed he possessed has withdrawn into a dimension he cannot enter, a different current awakens within him. It is made of unease, it is made of fascination, it is made of a soft, bewildered tenderness he often cannot name. Do not mistake this for the cliché of becoming desirable through distance. What is unfolding is far deeper than any game of approach and retreat. A woman who has returned to her own center emits a frequency, an inner vibration that no amount of availability can produce. That frequency reaches something in the unconscious masculine that nothing else can reach. It reaches the experience of meeting another soul, rather than the experience of meeting his own reflection in feminine clothing. Picture the forest in the deep middle of winter. Everything is white. Everything is still. A traveler walking through it might believe, at first glance, that nothing is happening, that the forest has fallen into a long, unbroken sleep. And yet, under the snow, in the patient dark of the soil, the roots continue an invisible work. The sap descends, gathers itself, concentrates its strength, prepares for a spring no one yet sees. Outwardly, nothing announces this. Inwardly, everything is transformation. A woman who has come home to herself is precisely this winter forest, apparently still, inwardly remade. And the man who looks at her senses, without being able to articulate it, that familiarity has given way to something else. There are layers in her gaze he had never noticed. There is an economy in her gestures that he cannot decode. Her silences carry a density his old interpretations cannot reach. He may try, sometimes clumsily, to recover the ground he once walked so easily. He asks questions designed to provoke the old reactions. He invokes memories, hoping the familiar emotional choreography will resume. But the choreography does not resume, because one of the dancers is no longer the same dancer. And so we arrive at the pivot that I wanted, very gently, to place before you. The distance we are describing is not a distance the woman manufactures. It is a distance the man discovers in himself. He suddenly realizes that his old instruments of understanding no longer reach her, and that realization, more than any spoken word, is what makes her, in his eyes, inaccessible. Inaccessible does not mean absent. Inaccessible does not mean cold. Inaccessible means that an inner territory now exists in her, and that he does not hold its map. She withdraws into it without announcement, without ceremony, sometimes without even noticing. That territory belongs to her alone, and it will belong to her alone for the rest of her life. Many women, while walking toward this dimension of themselves, pass through a period of doubt. They wonder whether they have become hard. They wonder whether they have lost their softness, their generosity, their gift for tenderness. Hear this carefully. True tenderness has never required transparency without boundary. Authentic generosity has never demanded the erasure of the self. What you once mistook for kindness was sometimes, beneath the surface, a strategy of disappearance designed to keep love within reach. The day you stopped disappearing, you did not become hard. You became present. Present to yourself first, and therefore, by inevitable consequence, present to the other in a new way. A presence that no longer melts into limitless availability. A presence with contours, with reserved interiors, with rooms whose doors are sometimes closed. Those very contours, those reserved interiors, those quietly closed doors are what produce, in the masculine psyche, the unmistakable sensation of mystery. Ancient mythologies remembered this. There are figures, in the oldest stories, who incarnate what we are describing. Goddesses who live at the threshold of forests, at the mouths of caves, beside springs hidden in the hills. They do not flee, they do not hide. They are simply there, fully there, and yet those who approach them feel, in a way that cannot be argued with, that they will never be entirely brought back into the ordinary world. Such figures still live, in symbolic form, inside the collective unconscious. They are the trace of a feminine knowing that was never destroyed, only veiled. When a woman returns to her center, she awakens, often without realizing it, that ancient archetypal quality within her. She becomes, for the eyes that watch her, a veiled presence. The veil I am speaking of is not made of fabric. It is woven from silence, from depth, from the quiet refusal to spill oneself out for the comfort of another. Here is one more sentence I want to leave like a smooth stone at the bottom of a river. A woman becomes unreachable on the day she no longer needs to be understood in order to exist. As long as she needs to be understood, she translates, she explains, she makes herself readable, and this readability, however beautiful, is precisely what holds the projection in place. The day she accepts simply to be, without translating herself, she enters another dimension of the feminine. Her presence no longer waits for validation. Her silence no longer apologizes for itself. That self-contained fullness is what the man perceives, without being able to name it, and the impossibility of naming it is part of what enchants him. He may try, in the days and weeks that follow this inner shift, to recover the woman he believed he knew. He will summon old memories. He will reference shared moments. Familiar emotional patterns will be invoked, as if to ask the past to please come back into the room. But at each attempt, he will sense that the woman in front of him is not entirely where he believed her to be. She is not absent. She is not hostile. What is true is that she is elsewhere, in a region of herself he had never visited, perhaps because she herself had not visited it in a very long time. For a man, this experience can be one of the most quietly devastating of his life. It forces him to confront the possibility that what he loved for so many years was not the woman herself, but the image he had projected onto her. And the real woman, in all her depth, had always slipped past his understanding, without either of them quite knowing it. This realization, when it comes, takes many shapes. Sometimes it awakens in him a fascination he never knew he was capable of. Sometimes it awakens an old fear of being unable to truly meet another. Sometimes it inspires, late but sincere, a real effort to reach her at last. Whatever its form, the realization marks the end of an old illusion, the illusion of psychic possession. And for you, what matters to know is that this moment of inner shift cannot be manufactured. It cannot be staged. No strategy will produce it. It comes the way spring comes after a long winter, when the underground work has been done, when the roots have done their patient labor in the dark. All attempts to perform this inaccessibility produce only emotional distance, which is a far poorer and far lonelier thing. True psychic inaccessibility is born of an interior movement so slow, so deep, so quiet, that it can take months or even years to complete. It is the movement by which a woman ceases to live as a reflection and begins to live as a source. A source does not run after the one who would drink from her. A source does not empty herself out of fear of being abandoned. A source remains in her depth, in her rhythm, in her fidelity to her own underground waters. And it is exactly this quality of presence that changes everything in the eyes of the other. If you recognize, somewhere in yourself, the beginning of this movement, if you feel that you are leaving, perhaps without entirely understanding it, the old position of mirror and entering the new position of source, then you are on the threshold of a transformation that countless women cross in silence, without ever being told it has a name. This space exists precisely to give names to those silent crossings. If this video has accompanied you all the way here, perhaps a part of you was already prepared to hear what was waiting to be said. You can subscribe to walk this path further, at your own rhythm, in the discretion these truths require. I want to close with this. The exact moment a woman becomes inaccessible in the mind of a man is not a dramatic moment. There is no scene, there is no declaration. What there is an almost sacred inner instant in which she returns to herself after a long absence from herself. She slams nothing, she breaks nothing, she demands nothing. She simply, finally, begins to inhabit her own life fully. And it is this inhabited presence, this quiet homecoming, that changes everything in the eyes of the one who believed he knew her. Not because she fled, not because she closed herself off, but because she is finally there, truly there, with all the depth he had never suspected. A woman becomes unreachable not when she leaves, but when she stops being absent from herself while remaining in the room. This kind of absence within presence is, perhaps, the highest form of feminine freedom. It is the freedom no one can take from you, because it no longer depends on anyone. It awakens in silence, in the secret hours of the inner night, on the day you finally agree to come home to the one place that truly belongs to you, which is yourself. May this crossing be gentle, and may the silence, from now on, begin to speak to you.